Hi, welcome to One on the Page. This is Scott. We're doing 5-Year Battle, Stephen King, 2004 to 2008. We're going to be starting off with Sagam Susanna, Dark Tower, Book 6. I said in the previous video that books 1, 5, and 6 I didn't like as much as 2, 3, 4, and 7. There are a few things that either don't work or shouldn't work in here. One is the introduction of Mia, which it would be hard to explain. There is Susanna's pregnancy. There is the introduction of the character Stephen King into the book. That's not the first time that Stephen King has entered his own fiction. He was mentioned in the Dead Zone, or his book Carrie was mentioned in the Dead Zone. He played a character, I believe, in the Blue Air Compressor, a short story that hasn't really made its way into a collection yet, but which I have read. He has had other works of his mentioned in his work. He has mentioned Stephen King in the Richard Bachman book Thinner, I believe, but he is a character of himself, not only in this book, but in book 7. And it's not necessarily a generous portrayal that he's giving himself there. So that can be a bit much for some people. I didn't mind it myself. Also, something he does in this book, which he also does in some of his short stories soon after, is bringing up 9/11. I mean, it probably depends on your point of view, how you feel about it. It plays a very small but integral part in here, so I don't have as much of a problem with it. I like the battle at the Dixie Pig. I like Father Callahan's part in this. As I said, it's not my most favorite of Dark Tower books. I think it's still a fairly decent book. Being the first book, I'm going to rank it number 1. Which then brings us to The Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower. If you have not read the Dark Tower series, one, you probably shouldn't watch this video before doing so. I will try to remain as spoiler-free as I can while also giving you a little bit of information about the book. But if you have read the series, you probably either really love this book or you really hate this book. And that seems to be a common view of it. I think it's gathered a little bit more love in the years since it was published. Lots of people are angry at the ending. I am not. I think it makes perfect sense for the story, and you can perhaps fill in what happens after the story yourself after you read it. It makes perfect sense. I do feel there are things in here that, as a reader of the Dark Tower series, upset me. I won't say make me angry, because, sometimes things happen in novels that there's a reason for it to happen, but you're still not happy about it. There are things that upset me, but make sense in this, even though I don't like them, and they suck. I kind of think that this book is a case of the whole being better than the sum of its parts. Some of its parts don't work, particularly when it comes to the bad guys. But it's an emotionally draining book, and I think it's a good conclusion to the series. Is it the best book in the Dark Tower series? Probably not. Is it the most important book in the Dark Tower series? Maybe. Chances are, if you're watching this video, I probably like this book more than you. There'll be a few of you where you'll like it more than I do. but I am going to put it at number one for right now. Some point in the future, I may rank the Dark Tower series itself, and that'll be interesting to figure out how that would go. Faithful, written with Stuart Onan. I'll be quite honest, if you're not a baseball fan, probably not going to like this. Even if you are a baseball fan and you don't care for the Red Sox, you may not like this. When I got this, I was still a baseball fan. I've kind of fallen out with baseball recently for many different reasons. The last time I really watched was the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, which was awesome, and I say that as somebody who was a Cardinals fan. However, I was born in Massachusetts, so I've always had a connection with the Red Sox. The Red Sox was the first major league team that I ever saw play in person. As a chronicle of that time, it's good. But because it's not going to, I was about to say, because it's not going to appeal to the average reader, that I was going to rank it low. But I have to look at it from my own point of view. And I know that I have said multiple times during this that this book is one of my least read ones. I have only read this twice. Once when I first got it, and once when I did my Stephen King read during 2020. I believe that this, except for like recent books, like with the last 3 or 4 years, this is my least read book. So, because it's a topic that I don't particularly care about as much as I once did, and a lot of it is contains like the two authors conversing back and forth. Much of it, there's a reason why Stuart Onan is on top, because he's the main writer, although King contributes quite a bit. But because of all that, I'm going to be ranking it at the bottom for now. The Colorado Kid. This was King's first book that he wrote for the Hard Case Crime series. It is a crime book, but it's not a crime book. I didn't like it the first time I read it. In subsequent readings, I enjoyed it more. It's never going to be my favorite book. I talked about before with From a Buick 8, the inconclusive ending or the non-ending. This is another book that falls within that. You don't really get an ending. If you're like me and you often enjoy the journey more than the ending, this may be your cup of tea. But even me, somebody who does enjoy that, I was kind of like, well, I mean, you had all this stuff and no conclusion. And that's life, but it doesn't have to be a book. Past that, though, I still think it's a pretty good read, at least until you get to the end and you're kind of like, well, why are we here? So for that reason, I am going to put it above Faithful. Cell. I have to be honest, the first time I read this, I hated this book. I just, no, I didn't like it at all. And I know that I've read it at least one other time before 2020, but it didn't really do anything for me then. But when I read it in 2020, I got into it a little bit more. I connected with the main character a little bit more, and some of the side characters. I I am not particularly pleased with the ending. Cell phones make everybody go mad, which is pretty much how people handle after that is the novel. So, um, another less than satisfactory ending. I feel like it just had a lot more that it could have told. I feel it discarded characters a little bit too easily, or at least from my point of view. I'm going to rank it above the Colorado Kid. Lisi's story. I actually really like this book quite a bit. I would suggest that if you have a chance to watch the miniseries, maybe don't. I don't think it quite holds up, but I will be honest, I didn't watch every episode of it, so I don't know how it concluded. But the story itself, about a writer's widow basically coping with her husband's death and with her husband's trauma. It is perhaps, except maybe for Wizard and Glass, which was a tale of teenage love, it's perhaps King's most romantic book, which is funny since the romance is between a woman and a man who is dead at the beginning of the book. But it does, of course, go back over their history. A problem I have with this, that I have a lot of King's more recent works, is that the antagonist doesn't really hold up that much. You'll see it come up again in books like Doctor Sleep. I'm thinking particularly. Sometimes it feels like King goes, well, there needs to be an antagonist, so I'm going to do this. And I think that everything that happens to Lisi is enough without adding, I believe his name is Brady, or I may be mixing him up with a character from Mr. Mercedes. Okay, I don't remember the guy's name, but I don't think that he's absolutely necessary in here. But beyond that, I do think it's still a great novel. Another novel where I probably think it's better than most of the people watching this. I'm here to make you upset. So I'm actually going to rank this under the Dark Tower 7 and above Song of Susanna. Now we have Blaze by Richard Bachman. This is, at least at this point in time, the last Richard Bachman book. Blaze is actually a novel that King originally wrote in the 70s. He wrote both Salem's Lot and Blaze. Salem's Lot as Second Coming, basically Dracula, but in modern day small town America. In Blaze, his take on Of Mice and Men. And he wisely, or his editor wisely, said, let's do Salem's Lot. Blaze is okay. It definitely made sense to go with Salem's Lot. Obviously, he has rewritten this since then, but you have the character Blaze, who, much like, I can't remember if it's Lenny or George in Of Mice and Men, but I believe it's Lenny, maybe, who is a little mentally slow. His partner is dead. He still talks to his partner, mainly in his head, though. But I think having that character missing as a living character kind of makes it more difficult to really get into the. And you can pretty much see the ending coming from almost the beginning of the novel. This is going to be another one that I've only read maybe 3 times. And I don't know, unless I go through another reread, that I'm going to actually go beyond that. Yeah, plot. He kidnaps a kid, which is always a great plot to start with to get you sympathetic to your hero, but he's a complete dumbass the entire time. He's not mentally capable to do this, and it turns out how you think it turns out. So I actually am going to place this under Faithful. I was thinking Faithful was probably going to be the lowest ranking book, but I just don't. I don't know. It's Blaze. Next up, Duma Key. Probably his greatest novel that still makes me angry. It's a great novel about a man who is very rich, has an accident, loses his arm, divorces his wife, or his wife divorces him. He moves down to Duma Key in Florida and starts painting, and his paintings have a magical quality to them. It makes me angry for reasons I can't explain. Sometimes characters appear in novels and you know they're going to be sacrificial lambs. And sometimes you're okay with it, sometimes you're not. I'm not okay with it this time. This is still a great novel, but it annoys me. And sometimes you just have to accept that things happen to people, but I don't have to like it. It doesn't change my opinion that this is a great book. It just pisses me off too. I'm going to rank this under Lacey's Story. And so the last book that we have is a short story collection, Just After Sunset. Unlike his previous short story collections, which increased in size pretty much continuously, this one is fairly short. It's like 400 and no, not even four. It's like 374 pages. Almost every story is psychologically based. This is one of the ones where it's easier for me to like give you the list of short stories I don't particularly like, which is Graduation Day and Harvey's Dream. Harvey's Dream is okay, but you can kind of see where it's going where after you start reading it. There's a couple of weird ones like Stationary Bike, but Willa, The Gingerbread Girl, Rest Stop, The Things They Left Behind, The Cat from Hell, A Very Tight Place. A Very Tight Place is probably my favorite short story in here, which is a little bit amusing because you know, I believe a lot of these stories are very much psychologically based, whereas A Very Tight Place is almost just straight action and revenge and people trying to harm each other, but it's enjoyable. And it gets down into the dirty, which you will, well, much of the action takes place in a porta potty. So leave it at that. I think if I were to tell somebody to pick up a Stephen King collection to introduce them to King, I would probably say either Night Shift or Skeleton Crew first. Probably Night Shift, but maybe Skeleton Crew. But after those two, this would be the one I would say this one's a good one. One, it's short. Two, almost all the stories are decent to great. You know, it doesn't have the lows that we have in other short story collections. You know, it has the mediums, but also has a lot of good to great ones. I'm going to place. Ooh, okay. So I'm putting it below Duma Key. I'm putting it below Duma Key. So we have 9 books this time. Number 9, Blaze by Richard Bachman. Number 8, Faithful by Stuart Onan and Stephen King. Number 7, The Colorado Kid. Number 6, Cell. Number 5, The Dark Tower 6, Song of Susanna. Number 4, Just After Sunset. Number 3, Duma Key. Number 2, Lisi's Story. Just by the barest, but it's still number 2. And number 1, The Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower. That's it for this week. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for Stephen King 5-Year Battle of the years 2009 through 2013.